So it's time for us to leave behind the first act and enter the second act. And in our discussion of the second act, we're going to be focusing on the pinch points. You may have heard of these little darlings, or you may not have. Of all the important structural moments in your story, the pinch points are probably the most likely to be neglected. They tend to get lost amidst all the chatter about the bigger and flashier plot points. And there tends to be quite a bit of confusion swirling around the subject. What are pinch points? How do they compare to plot points? Where do they belong in the story? What is it they do? And what happens to your story when you neglect them? So let us dive into the second act and find out about pinch points and about what needs to happen in these spaces between them. Pinch points are, comparatively, small turning points that occur at the 37% mark, which is halfway between the first plot point and the midpoint, and at the 62% mark, which is halfway between the midpoint and the third plot point. At their most basic level, pinch points are nothing more or less than a reminder of the antagonistic force's power to stymie the protagonist's goal. They provide new information to the plot, which will set up the major events, respectively, in the midpoint and the third plot point. And they also act as important foreshadowing for the confrontation that will play out during these plot points and during the climax. They're a pacing trick that reorients the reader's attention during the long span of the second act. In some stories, you find pinch points that have no immediate effect upon the protagonist because the whole scene might take place in the antagonist's POV, with the protagonist himself never even gaining any specific knowledge about what's just happened. A good example of this is The Empire Strikes Back's first pinch point, which is where the Emperor tells Darth Vader to hunt down Luke Skywalker because he's their new enemy. Luke himself knows nothing about this conversation, but the viewers do. So that's the basics of pinch points, and you may already be completely familiar with all of that, but there's more to understand. The best pinch points are always those that offer more than just these simplistic turning points or sneak peeks into the antagonist's plans. If you're going to use your pinch points to their maximum potential, then you need to make certain they each create very distinctive moments in your story, which can then influence every scene that leads up to their respective subsequent plot points. So let's look at them one by one and see how they're different from one another, how they influence the entire timeline of the second act, and how you can take full advantage of them in your story.